The champagne tasted like copper in my mouth as I watched Kaito brush a strand of hair from Reina's face. That small gesture, intimate, automatic, practiced, twisted something in my chest. I swallowed hard and set my glass on a passing server's tray. I shouldn't have come. The thought had cycled through my head at least 30 times since I'd stepped onto the Sapphire Hotel's rooftop garden an hour ago. Strings of fairy lights crisscrossed above the space, transforming the Tokyo skyline into a mere backdrop for the happy couple's celebration. 3 years together, and Kaito had ended things because he wasn't ready for anything serious. 6 months later, here he was, celebrating his engagement to someone else. The math didn't add up, no matter how I calculated it. I smoothed down my dress, the navy one I'd bought for our last anniversary dinner, and wondered if he recognized it. Probably not. Kaito had never been particularly observant about those things. At least that's what I told myself as I lingered near a flowering plum tree, trying to look like I belonged among Tokyo's elite. Haru materialized beside me, his familiar cologne a momentary comfort. "You holding up okay, Nami?" "Fantastic. Absolutely living my best life." I grabbed another champagne flute from a passing server. "Thanks for the invitation, by the way. Nothing like watching your ex get engaged to really spice up a Saturday night." Haru winced. "I thought you should hear it from someone who cared about you, not through Instagram?" Too late. I took a long sip. Nothing says I've moved on like finding out your ex is engaged through social media. "I'm sorry. I should have warned you sooner." Haru's eyes, so similar to Kaito's that it sometimes hurt to look at him, were genuinely apologetic. "If it helps, I think you're handling it with impressive dignity." I snorted. "Is that what this is? I thought it was barely contained emotional collapse." A business associate pulled Haru away with promises that he'd check on me later. Left alone, I surveyed the party with the clinical detachment of someone trying very hard not to feel anything at all. Reina was beautiful in the effortless way that only serious money can achieve. Her sleek black hair fell to her shoulders in a perfect cut that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She laughed at something an older man said, her hand resting on Kaito's arm with casual possessiveness. I hadn't planned to approach them. In fact, my entire strategy had been to make a brief appearance, congratulate the couple from a safe distance, and escape before anyone noticed the brittle quality of my smile. But then Reina's gaze landed on me across the rooftop, and her eyes lit with recognition. Not of me specifically, but of someone she should probably know. She was walking toward me before I could retreat, pulling Kaito along. My exits blocked, my heart hammering. I straightened my spine and prepared to perform the role of supportive friend. "You must be one of Kaito's friends," Reina said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I've been trying to meet everyone important to him." Important to him. The phrase echoed hollowly as I shook her hand, noticing how Kaito wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "Nanami," I supplied. "Kaito and I were best friends in college." The lie slipped out before I could stop it. Kaito's head snapped up, surprise flashing across his face before settling into carefully constructed neutrality. "Oh, Kaito mentioned you once or twice. You work in corporate events, right?" "Once or twice." 3 years condensed into a casual mention. I took a breath, steadying myself. "That's right. Event coordination for Shinwa Industries." I forced a smile as Kaito shifted his weight uncomfortably beside her. "Nanami and I go way back," Kaito finally spoke, his voice tight. "Nice of you to come, Nami." Reina beamed. "How wonderful. Kaito has so few close friends from before we met. He's such a private person." Private, that was one word for it. Another might be deceptive. Or cowardly. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from saying either. "Congratulations on your engagement," I managed. "The party is beautiful." "Thank you. But honestly, I'm already stressing about the wedding. My family has certain expectations, and finding a good planner has been a nightmare. Everyone's either booked solid or doesn't understand my vision." Something sparked in me then, a dangerous, reckless impulse, born from 6 months of unanswered questions and unprocessed pain. "Actually, I'm a wedding planner," I heard myself say. "I've recently branched out from corporate events." Kaito choked on his champagne. "Really?" Reina's eyes widened with interest. "That's perfect. Someone who already knows Kaito would be ideal." I nodded, committed now to this spontaneous lie. I specialized in luxury weddings after years in corporate events. The transition was natural. "Do you have a card?" Reina asked, excitement building in her voice. My mind raced, By some stroke of fortune or cosmic joke, I actually did have business cards in my clutch, ones I'd had made for a freelance event consulting gig that never materialized. Of course, I fished one out, grateful that it only listed my name, phone number, and the vague title of event specialist, nothing that would contradict my sudden career change. Raina examined the card with genuine interest. "I'd love to hear your ideas. Would you be available to meet next week?" Beside her, Kaito had gone rigid. His eyes held a warning that I chose to ignore. "Absolutely," I replied, meeting his gaze directly. "I have a feeling this wedding could be truly memorable." Raina clapped her hands together. "Wonderful. I'll call you to set something up." A business associate pulled them away then, saving me from having to maintain the facade any longer. I watched them walk away, Kaito's back stiff with tension, Raina already showing my card to another guest. What had I done? The panic should have set in immediately, but instead I felt strangely calm, almost exhilarated. For 6 months I'd been passive, a woman who'd been left behind. Now I had purpose, even if it was built on a lie. I made my way toward the elevator, texting May as I went. Outside, the Tokyo night engulfed me. Traffic hummed below as I stood under the hotel's canopy waiting. My phone buzzed with May's response. "Already here. Black car right side." I spotted her vehicle and walked toward it, my mind already racing with plans. Wedding websites to build, contacts to call, research to do. The impossibility of it all should have terrified me, but instead, I felt more alive than I had in months. May rolled down her window, her expression prepared for damage control. "How bad was it? Do we need ice cream or tequila? I'm equipped for either emergency." "Neither," I said, sliding into the passenger seat. "I need your graphic design skills instead." She stared at me, confusion replacing concern. "You look different. Not destroyed? Why don't you look destroyed?" "Because I'm not," I replied, surprising myself with how true it felt. "I'm going to plan Kaito and Reina's wedding." "You're going to what?" May nearly swerved into the next lane. "It's a long story." I fastened my seatbelt, ideas already forming. But I think I just found a way to move forward, or possibly commit career suicide. Either way, I need business cards by tomorrow. May looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. But as we merged into the Tokyo traffic, heading away from the Sapphire Hotel and Kaito's perfect engagement party, I felt something I hadn't expected. Possibility. The heartbreak was still there, a dull ache beneath my ribs, but alongside it now ran a current of determination. I wasn't just Kaito's ex-girlfriend anymore. I was Nanami Mizushima, newly minted wedding planner with precisely one client, the woman who had replaced me. I stood in the center of my living room, surrounded by stacks of wedding magazines, printed Pinterest boards, and half a dozen industry guidebooks express delivered yesterday. The coffee table had disappeared completely under sample fabrics and color swatches. My laptop balanced precariously on the arm of the sofa, browser tabs open to 20 different wedding venues across Tokyo. 2 weeks of frantic preparation had transformed my modest Shibuya apartment into what I hoped resembled a legitimate wedding planning headquarters. The reality was more like the aftermath of a bridal magazine explosion. My phone buzzed. I lunged for it, knocking over a stack of centerpiece sketches. "This is Nanami Mizushima," I answered, attempting to sound professional despite the paper avalanche at my feet. "Nanami, it's Reina Takahashi. We met at the engagement party?" My stomach dropped. Despite my bravado that night, I'd half convinced myself she wouldn't actually call. "Reina, of course. How are you?" I crouched down, gathering scattered papers while cradling the phone against my shoulder. "Wonderful. I've been thinking about what you said about wedding planning, and I'd love to discuss working together. Are you available to meet tomorrow? I know it's short notice." I glanced at my makeshift desk where a notebook contained exactly 0 wedding planning experience and a growing list of things I needed to learn overnight. "Tomorrow works perfectly," I lied. "I could meet you at Maple Cafe in Roppongi around noon." "Perfect! Kaito can join us too. I'll see you then." I ended the call and immediately dialed May, who picked up on the second ring. "She called," I said, my voice slightly higher than normal. "Reina actually called and wants to meet tomorrow. I'm completely screwed." "Hold on. I'm coming over." May hung up before I could respond. 40 minutes later, my doorbell rang. May stood there with her laptop bag, a bottle of wine, and determination written across her face. "Show me what we're working with," she said, kicking off her shoes. I waved at the chaos around us. A massive lie and 5 years of corporate event planning experience that has nothing to do with weddings. May set down her things and examined the mess covering my living room. Actually, this isn't hopeless. Corporate events and weddings have a lot in common. Venues, catering, decorations, logistics. She picked up one of the guidebooks. You just need to speak the language and have a portfolio, which I don't have, I reminded her. You have photos from all those Shinwa events, right? The product launches, the executive retreats. I nodded slowly, understanding forming. You're suggesting we repurpose them? Exactly. May opened her laptop. Send me everything you've got. I'll edit out corporate logos, tweak colors, add some wedding elements. By morning, you'll have a surprisingly diverse wedding portfolio. I retrieved my external hard drive and handed it to May. This feels wrong. More wrong than lying about being a wedding planner to your ex's fiancé. May raised an eyebrow. Fair point. We worked through the night. May transformed sterile corporate photos into romantic wedding scenes while I drafted sample timelines, budgets, and vendor lists based on the wedding guides. By 5 a.m, we had assembled what looked like a legitimate portfolio, elegant, professional, and completely fabricated. I can't believe we did this, I said, staring at the final product. May closed her laptop. You realize you're actually qualified for most of this, right? Wedding planning is just specialized event coordination. With a side of emotional manipulation and family drama, I mumbled, imagining how the meeting would go. Which you've definitely handled at Shinwa. May gave me a pointed look. Remember that disaster with the CEO's nephew at last year's retirement party? I winced at the memory. Good point. Get some sleep, May said, gathering her things, and wear something that screams, I organize joyful life events for a living. 3 hours later, I woke to my alarm, feeling like I'd been hit by a train. After a quick shower and 2 cups of coffee, I put on a floral blouse and tailored pants that I hoped conveyed both professionalism and whimsy. The portfolio went into my nicest leather folder, and I practiced my experienced wedding planner smile in the mirror until it almost looked authentic. Maple Cafe occupied the ground floor of a sleek glass building in Roppongi Hills. I arrived 20 minutes early to secure a quiet corner table and order a third coffee to steady my nerves. The cafe's warm lighting and rustic decor created a deceptively calm atmosphere for what was about to be the most absurd business meeting of my career. At precisely noon, Reina entered, spotting me immediately. She looked effortlessly elegant in a simple white dress. Kaito followed behind her, his face unreadable until he saw me. His expression briefly flashed something between disbelief and anger before smoothing into a neutral mask. Nanami, Reina approached the table with genuine warmth. Thank you so much for meeting us. I stood, accepting her brief hug. My pleasure. It's wonderful to see you again. Kaito nodded stiffly. Nanami. Kaito. I matched his tone perfectly. We sat down, Reina between us like an unwitting buffer. A server appeared with menus, giving me a moment to compose myself. I've been thinking about our wedding non-stop, Reina began excitedly. My parents expect something traditional, but I'd love modern elements too. Something uniquely us. She reached for Kaito's hand. I watched his fingers tense slightly before returning her squeeze. An almost imperceptible reaction that Reina didn't seem to notice. That sounds perfect, I said. Blending traditional and contemporary elements creates something truly memorable. I opened my portfolio, grateful for May's overnight miracle work. Here are some examples of how I've balanced those elements in previous weddings. Reina leaned forward, examining the photos with genuine interest. These are gorgeous. I love how you used modern lighting with the traditional temple backdrop in this one. The temple had actually been Shinwa's corporate headquarters during their 15th anniversary celebration. May had digitally enhanced the building's Japanese architectural elements and added cherry blossom decorations. Thank you. That couple wanted to honor their heritage while reflecting their contemporary lifestyle. I improvised, turning the page. And here's an example of how we created intimate moments within a larger reception. Kaito remained silent, his jaw tight as he watched Reina grow increasingly enthusiastic. I could practically hear his thoughts. What the hell are you doing? Could you handle something for 300 guests? Reina asked. My father's business connections alone account for nearly half that. Absolutely. Large-scale events are my specialty. At least that wasn't a lie. I'd ensure intimacy for you and your closest friends while accommodating your father's requirements. Kaito finally spoke. And what about your other clients? Surely you're booked with other weddings. His tone suggested he was trying to corner me, but I'd anticipated this question. I'm very selective about the weddings I take on, I replied smoothly. I prefer to work with couples whose vision resonates with me. Quality over quantity. Raina beamed. That's exactly what we need. Someone who'll give our wedding personal attention. For the next hour, I answered questions about venues, timelines, and budgets with surprising confidence. My corporate experience actually translated well, and the research I'd done allowed me to drop industry terms and vendor names convincingly. Reina grew more excited with each answer, while Kaito became increasingly tense. I think we've found our wedding planner, Reina finally announced, squeezing my hand across the table. Your portfolio is stunning, and you clearly understand what we need. Kaito shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should meet with a few other planners before deciding? Reina turned to him, surprised. Why? Nanami is perfect. She's talented, she already knows you, and she has availability. She looked back at me. When can you start? Immediately, I said, meeting Kaito's gaze directly. I'd love to work with you both. Wonderful. Reina stood, checking her watch. I have a lunch meeting with my mother in 20 minutes. Kaito, could you handle the contract details with Nanami? I trust you completely with this. Before either of us could object, she kissed Kaito on the cheek and squeezed my shoulder. I'll call you later. I'm so excited. We watched in silence as she left the cafe, her white dress disappearing into the midday crowd. The moment she was gone, Kaito's polite facade crumbled. Outside. Now. He stood abruptly. I gathered my portfolio and followed him through the cafe's side door into a small garden area. No other patrons were there, just potted plants and uncomfortable truths. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded, voice low and controlled despite his obvious anger. I maintained my composure, meeting his gaze directly, pursuing a new career opportunity. Bullshit. You're not a wedding planner, Nami. Actually, I am now. I gestured to my portfolio, and your fiancé just hired me. This is completely inappropriate. You and I were... He cut himself off. Were what, Kaito? Together for 3 years before you suddenly decided you weren't ready for anything serious? I kept my voice low but couldn't mask the bitterness. Funny how quickly that changed. He ran a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture that once made my heart flutter. Now it just irritated me. That's different. You know my family's situation is complicated. No, I don't know. You never explained anything. You just ended things and disappeared. And now you're marrying someone else 6 months later. 3 months, he corrected automatically, then winced. 3 months, I repeated. You started dating Reina 3 months after we broke up? He looked away. It wasn't planned. Right, I crossed my arms. Nothing ever is with you. Are you trying to sabotage my wedding? He asked bluntly. The question should have offended me, but it was fair. Was that what I was doing? The honest answer was complicated. No, I finally said. I'm trying to build something for myself out of the mess you left behind. He stared at me, clearly struggling to believe me. If you're so concerned about my presence, I continued, why haven't you told Reina about us? Does she know you were in a serious relationship until recently? His silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. I stepped closer. So before you question my motives, maybe examine your own honesty. It's not that simple, he said, his voice softer now. Her family, there are expectations. There always are. I gathered my things. Look, I'm not here to ruin anything. Reina seems lovely, and she deserves a beautiful wedding. I can actually deliver that. How? You've never planned a wedding in your life. I managed the CEO's daughter's birthday gala at Shinwa last year. 200 guests, custom entertainment, 5-course meal, and a last-minute venue change when the original flooded. A wedding is just a birthday party with more crying and a white dress. Kaito almost smiled despite himself. You always did handle crisis well. Better than you, I reminded him. We stood there in uncomfortable silence, the weight of our history hanging between us. Kaito, are you out here? Reina's voice startled us both. She rounded the corner, a purse slung over her shoulder. I forgot my phone charger in the car. She looked between us, noticing our tense postures. Everything okay? Fine, Kaito said quickly. Just discussing contract details. I nodded, professional smile back in place. Kaito had some excellent questions about payment schedules. Reina seemed relieved. Great. Did you decide anything? Nanami will send us a formal proposal tomorrow, Kaito said with a look that clearly communicated this discussion wasn't over. Perfect. Reina looped her arm through Kaito's. I really have to run now. Nanami, I'm so thrilled we're working together. I watched them walk away, Reina chatting animatedly while Kaito nodded mechanically. Just before they turned the corner, he glanced back at me with a clear warning in his eyes. My phone buzzed with a text from May. How did it go? I typed, I'm officially planning my ex's wedding. I'll explain everything tonight. Back in my apartment, I surveyed the mess of wedding research with new purpose. This wasn't just about spite anymore, though that still simmered beneath the surface. This was about proving something to myself, that I could excel at this unexpected challenge, that I could face Kaito on my own terms, that I was more than someone who got left behind. I opened my laptop and created a new document titled Takahashi Nakamura Wedding. Then I made a list of industry contacts from my Shinwa days, florists, caterers, venues, photographers, people who might not question my sudden career change too closely. By midnight, I'd sent emails to a dozen vendors requesting meetings and pricing. I'd drafted a legitimate contract based on templates I found online. I'd created a basic project timeline that actually made sense. My phone rang. It was May. So you actually did it, she said when I answered. You're planning Kaito's wedding. Apparently so. Are you insane or brilliant? I genuinely can't tell. I looked around at my apartment, at the transformation that had happened in just 2 weeks from heartbroken ex-girlfriend to wedding planner with my first client. Maybe both, I admitted, but I'm gonna make this work. And by make this work, you mean plan the hell out of this wedding and establish myself in a new career that I accidentally invented, I replied. What did you think I meant? May laughed. Just checking. For what it's worth, I think you'll be amazing at this. You've always been good at making beautiful things happen under pressure. After we hung up, I stood at my window looking out at the Shibuya lights. Somewhere across the city, Kaito was probably worrying about what I might do to his carefully constructed new life. He didn't understand that this wasn't about him anymore. I turned back to my work, to the beginnings of something that had started as a lie but felt increasingly real. Tomorrow I would call more vendors. I would create mood boards and budget spreadsheets. I would become the wedding planner I had claimed to be. And maybe, just maybe, I would finally start moving forward. My apartment had transformed into a proper wedding planning command center. Sample invitations lined the walls, fabric swatches covered every surface, and 3 different wedding planning apps sent constant notifications to my phone. I'd spent weeks compiling vendor lists, creating detailed spreadsheets, and building relationships with Tokyo's elite wedding suppliers who, miraculously, hadn't questioned my sudden appearance in their industry. The Garden of Dreams in Meguro had required serious negotiating to secure for the Takahashi Nakamura wedding. Its manicured Japanese gardens and glass pavilion overlooking a koi pond made it one of Tokyo's most sought-after venues. Getting it had involved name-dropping Reina's father, a tactic I'd learned worked frighteningly well. The gardens will be perfect for the ceremony, I explained to Reina as we walked the stone pathways during our site visit. Cherry blossoms would be in full bloom for their spring wedding, creating the romantic backdrop Reina had described in our initial meeting. Reina trailed her fingers along a wooden railing overlooking the pond. It's exactly what I imagined. She turned to me with genuine warmth. You're making this so much easier than I expected, Nanami. I smiled, ignoring the twist in my stomach. Over the past few weeks, I'd grown to genuinely like Reina. She was thoughtful, appreciative, and surprisingly grounded for someone from her background. She didn't deserve the web of lies I'd created. Where's Kaito today? I asked, checking items off my venue inspection list. This marked the 3rd planning meeting he'd missed in 2 weeks. Conference call with investors. She sighed, her gaze drifting across the gardens. He works so hard. Sometimes I worry he's taking on too much with the wedding happening at the same time. I made a non-committal noise, having learned it was better than voicing my actual thoughts about Kaito's consistent absences. Can I ask you something personal? Reina leaned against the railing, her expensive cashmere coat catching the February wind. I tensed but nodded. Did you and Kaito ever date other people while you were friends? I mean, was he always so reserved about relationships? The question caught me off guard. I focused on writing notes about the garden layout while formulating my response. Kaito's always been private, I said carefully. Why do you ask? It's just... She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. We only dated for 3 months before he proposed. Sometimes I wonder if that was enough time to really know each other. I nearly dropped my clipboard. 3 months? She nodded, misinterpreting my shock. I know it seems fast. My father said the same thing, 3 months after our breakup. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been struggling to function after our relationship ended, Kaito had immediately moved on. And not just to casual dating, but to engagement. What made you say yes? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Reina's expression softened. He seemed so certain, and there was this intensity between us that felt important. She laughed lightly. Plus, my father approved, which never happens. He's hated every man I've ever dated. I nodded, writing meaningless notes to have something to do with my hands. And what about now? Are you happy? Of course, she answered too quickly, then more quietly. Most days. The venue coordinator appeared then, saving me from having to respond. As she led us through the reception areas, I catalogued what I'd learned. Kaito and Reina's relationship had moved with suspicious speed, and Reina's father approved when he'd apparently disapproved of previous boyfriends. Something didn't add up. The Imperial Hotel's pastry kitchen smelled like vanilla and sugar. 4-tiered cake samples stood displayed on a long marble counter, each decorated with intricate sugar flowers that matched Reina's chosen palette. The sakura blossom design complements your venue perfectly, the pastry chef explained, pointing to the pale pink flowers cascading down one cake, and the interior can be any flavor combination you prefer. Reina tasted each sample meticulously, making detailed notes about texture and flavor. Beside her, Kaito checked his phone every 30 seconds, barely participating. When he did try a sample, his feedback amounted to, "It's fine," or whatever Reina wants. "What do you think of the yuzu with white chocolate?" Reina asked him, offering a forkful. He glanced up from his phone. "Sure, sounds good." "You didn't even try it," she said, her smile tightening. "I trust your judgment." He returned to his screen. I watched their interaction with growing discomfort. Having spent 3 years with Kaito, I recognized his distracted behavior, the same distant attitude he'd displayed in the final months of our relationship. "Kaito," I intervened, "maybe you could look at the groom's cake options. They have some interesting designs." He reluctantly pocketed his phone and moved to examine the display the chef indicated. Once he was out of earshot, I turned to Reina. "Everything okay?" She sighed. "He's been like this all week. Work stress, I think." I nodded sympathetically, though I suspected it was more than that. "I shouldn't complain," she continued, selecting another sample. "He's under so much pressure with the merger." "Merger?" "Between our families' companies." She spoke casually, as if this were common knowledge. "It's been in the works for months. That's actually how we met, at a business dinner my father arranged." Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I recalled Kaito mentioning his family's complicated situation during our confrontation at the cafe. "So your family's companies are merging," I repeated carefully. "Is that happening before or after the wedding?" "It's all tied together, really." She lowered her voice as Kaito approached. "The contracts are being finalized the week after our honeymoon." Before I could probe further, Kaito rejoined us. "The chocolate one," he said decisively, pointing to a simple dark chocolate design. Reina looked disappointed. "But you've barely looked at the options." "I told you I trust your judgment." His tone carried a finality that ended the discussion. I watched Reina's enthusiasm deflate slightly. She rallied quickly, directing her questions back to the pastry chef. But I'd seen the hurt cross her face. It was familiar, the same expression I'd worn countless times during Kaito's gradual withdrawal from our relationship. As we left the hotel, Reina was called away by her assistant for an urgent matter, leaving Kaito and me alone in the lobby. The silence between us stretched uncomfortably. "You could at least pretend to be interested," I finally said. He looked at me, genuine surprise on his face. "In cake? In your wedding?" I kept my voice low but couldn't hide my irritation. "Reina is trying so hard and you're barely participating." "It's just cake, Nami. It's not just cake to her." I gathered my portfolio tighter against my chest. "And don't call me Nami. We're not friends." He ran a hand through his hair, that frustratingly familiar gesture. "This whole situation is absurd. You planning my wedding, pretending we were just college friends? How long do you think this charade can last?" "As long as it needs to," I replied. "The question is, how long is your charade going to last?" His jawline tensed. "What's that supposed to mean? 3 months, Kaito? You dated her for 3 months after ending things with me, then proposed?" He looked away. It's complicated. So I've heard. And now there's a business merger involved? Were you ever going to mention that part? Before he could answer, Raina returned, slipping her phone into her purse. Sorry about that. Shall we go over the menu options next? I switched seamlessly back to professional mode. Actually, we should probably wrap up for today. I have all I need for the cake decision. Why don't we schedule the menu tasting for next week? As we parted ways outside the hotel, I watched Kaito help Raina into their waiting car. His movements were performed with practiced precision but lacked any real warmth. She didn't seem to notice, already discussing their evening plans. I wondered if she ever noticed. Or if, like me, she was becoming expert at making excuses for his behavior. Hold still, I muttered around a mouthful of pins as I adjusted the hem of Raina's wedding dress. We were in the private fitting room of Hanako Bridal, Tokyo's most exclusive wedding salon. Sorry, Raina said, trying to remain motionless. I'm just excited. The dress is perfect. It was perfect. A custom Vera Wang with hand-embroidered cherry blossoms that echoed the Garden of Dreams scenery. The slim silhouette emphasized Raina's elegant frame, while the modest train added just enough drama. Almost done, I said, placing the final pin. The alterations should be ready for your final fitting next month. As I stood, my knees protesting after kneeling for so long, I caught Raina staring at her reflection with an unreadable expression. Second thoughts? I asked lightly, arranging the train. Not about the dress. She smoothed the fabric over her hips. My father visited last night. He brought the final merger documents for review. I busied myself gathering the pins, trying to appear casually interested, rather than desperate for information. That must be a relief to have it moving forward. He made it very clear that everything depends on the wedding proceeding as planned. She turned to face me. He actually said, "The Nakamuras will sign when you say I do." I frowned. That's romantic. It's business. She shrugged, but the movement looked forced. The Nakamura company has been struggling since the recession. The merger will save them from bankruptcy, but my father's terms are strict. And the wedding is one of those terms, I finished for her. She nodded, turning back to the mirror. My father has arranged everything in my life, my schools, my activities, my career path. I shouldn't be surprised he arranged my marriage, too. The salon attendant knocked softly before entering. Is everything all right, Miss Takahashi? Perfect, Raina replied, her professional smile returning instantly. Nanami has worked her magic. As the attendant helped Raina out of the dress, I processed what I'd learned. This wasn't just a business merger. It was a business arrangement disguised as a marriage. Kaito's family needed Raina's father's company to survive, and the price was Kaito himself. For the first time, I felt a twinge of sympathy for him. Then I remembered how he'd ended things with me, abruptly, with no real explanation. While this arrangement was likely already in motion, my sympathy evaporated. I think the gray is too traditional, I said, examining Kaito in the tailored suit. We were at Ishikawa formal wear, selecting attire for the groomsmen. The navy would better complement Raina's color scheme. Kaito tugged at the collar, looking uncomfortable. Whatever works. After 2 hours and 3 whiskeys from the shop's complimentary bar, he'd grown increasingly disinterested in the selection process. Each suit looked fine, and every decision was met with indifference. This is your wedding, I reminded him, growing frustrated. You could at least pretend to have an opinion. He finished his drink and set the glass down hard. You know what? The navy. Let's go with the navy and be done with it. I nodded to the tailor, who disappeared to retrieve the correct sizes for Kaito's groomsmen. Another? Kaito gestured to the bar. I'm working, and I'm drowning. He poured himself another whiskey without waiting for my response. The tailor had left us alone in the private fitting area, and Kaito seemed determined to take advantage of the temporary privacy. Why are you doing this? He asked, leaning against the wall. Planning weddings? I told you it's a career pivot. No. He waved his glass dismissively. Why are you planning my wedding? Is it revenge? Torture? I crossed my arms. Maybe I'm just good at my job. The job you didn't have until you saw me with Raina. He took another drink. You're punishing me. Not everything is about you, Kaito. This particular thing seems like it is. He moved closer, the alcohol making him bold. You want to know the truth? I'm trapped. This whole thing, the wedding, the merger, all of it, it wasn't my choice. I stepped back. You chose to propose. Did I? He laughed bitterly. My family's company is weeks away from bankruptcy. Takahashi-san made it very clear that Reina comes with the merger. No marriage, no deal. Despite my determination to remain detached, I felt a painful twist of understanding. So you're sacrificing yourself for the family business? For 300 employees who would lose their jobs? For my parents' retirement? For my own future? He set down his glass. What would you have done? I had no answer. The worst part, he continued, his voice dropping, I still think about you. All the time. Planning this wedding with you is like some elaborate form of torture. Don't. I moved toward the door. You don't get to say that to me. Nami. He caught my wrist, his touch sending an unwelcome jolt through my system. I never stopped caring about you. You have a strange way of showing it. I pulled my arm free. And I told you not to call me that. What we had is over, I interrupted firmly. You ended it, remember? And then you got engaged to someone else 3 months later. His expression darkened. You think I wanted this? To be bartered off like some corporate asset? I think you made your choice, I replied. And now you have to live with it. Reina deserves better than a fiancé who's in love with someone else. I never said I was in love with you, he shot back defensively. You never said a lot of things. I gathered my portfolio. The navy suits will be ready next week. I'll coordinate with your best man for the fittings. As I turned to leave, he called after me. You don't understand what you're involved in. The Takahashi family, they're not what they seem. I paused at the door. What does that mean? Ask Reina about her previous relationships. Ask why they all mysteriously fell apart when her father disapproved. Before I could respond, the tailor returned with an armful of navy suits. I used the interruption to make my escape, my mind racing with what Kaito had implied. Outside the shop, I breathed in the cool evening air, trying to clear my head. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Yumiko Takahashi, Reina's cousin. We need to talk about my uncle and Reina's previous boyfriends. Things aren't what they seem. Be careful. I stared at the message, a chill running down my spine that had nothing to do with the February air. First Kaito's warning, now this. What exactly had I gotten myself involved in? As I walked toward the train station, another question kept circling in my mind. Did Reina deserve to know the truth about Kaito and me? About his feelings? About how quickly he'd moved on to her after our breakup? The wedding was still months away. I had time to decide what was right, but with each revelation, the web of secrets grew more tangled, and my role as wedding planner and keeper of those secrets grew more complicated. I tucked my phone away and quickened my pace. Whatever the Takahashi family was hiding, whatever Kaito's true feelings were, I needed to figure out where my loyalties lay, with my client, with the truth, or with my own heart. The Sakura restaurant's private room buzzed with polite conversation and the gentle clinking of champagne glasses. I adjusted the seating cards one last time, ensuring the calligraphy faced each place setting at perfect angles. 2 weeks before the wedding, the rehearsal dinner served as the final gathering of both families before the ceremony. A dry run that was proving anything but dry, with the amount of premium sake flowing. Everything looks perfect, May whispered, appearing beside me in a sleek black dress. I'd convinced her to attend as my assistant partly for moral support and partly because I needed someone I could trust. Perfect is generous, I muttered. Did you see Kaito's father's face when he shook hands with Takahashi-san, like he was greeting his executioner? May raised an eyebrow. Well, from what you've told me about this merger, that might not be far off. I watched as the two families circulated, maintaining carefully constructed smiles. The Nakamuras were visibly tense, while the Takahashis moved with practiced confidence through the room. Reina floated between guests in a champagne-colored dress that cost more than my monthly rent, playing the perfect hostess despite the shadows under her eyes. I need to check on the kitchen timing, I said, squeezing May's arm before slipping toward the service corridor. As I reached for the kitchen door, raised voices from a small private room caught my attention. The door was ajar, and through the crack, I could see Kaito and Takahashi-san facing each other like boxers before a match. The terms were clear from the beginning, Takahashi-san was saying, his voice cool and controlled. The merger depends on this marriage. If you're having second thoughts, it's not about second thoughts, Kaito interrupted. It's about the revised contract your lawyers sent yesterday. Those weren't the terms we discussed. Takahashi-san's laugh was short and without humor. The market changes, Nakamura-san. Your company's position has weakened further. The new terms reflect that reality. You're deliberately driving our stock down, Kaito hissed. "Those mysterious sell-offs last week. That was your doing." "Prove it." Takahashi-san straightened his already immaculate tie. "Or better yet, ensure my daughter's happiness. Sign the contracts after the ceremony as agreed, and your family's company might survive. Otherwise," he shrugged elegantly, "bankruptcy proceedings are quite public, aren't they?" I pressed myself against the wall as Takahashi-san moved toward the door. My heart hammered against my ribs as he passed within inches of where I stood, never glancing in my direction. After he disappeared down the corridor, I peered back through the crack. Kaito remained alone, knuckles white as he gripped the edge of a small table. The defeated slump of his shoulders made him look suddenly older, worn down by forces larger than himself. I should have left. Instead, I knocked softly and entered. "Nanami," he said, straightening immediately, his public mask sliding back into place. "Was there a problem with the dinner service?" "No," I said, "but there seems to be a problem with your future father-in-law." Kaito's jaw tightened. "It's nothing, just last-minute business details." It didn't sound like nothing. I lowered my voice. "He's threatening your family's company, isn't he? Using the marriage as leverage? You shouldn't be involving yourself in this." He moved toward the door. "I'm already involved," I said. "I'm planning this wedding, remember?" He paused, conflict visible in the lines of his face. "Then do your job and make sure it happens, for everyone's sake." Before I could respond, he brushed past me and rejoined the party, leaving me alone with questions I had no right to ask, but couldn't stop turning over in my mind. "The cherry blossom arrangements are exquisite," Raina said, joining me at the back of the room as guests began taking their seats for dinner. "Thank you for suggesting them. They complement the venue theme," I replied automatically, noting how she fidgeted with her engagement ring. "Is everything all right?" Raina glanced around to ensure no one was within earshot. "Can we talk? Somewhere private?" I led her to a small alcove off the main room where staff had set up a secondary bar for overflow. Currently empty, it offered a momentary refuge from the carefully orchestrated celebration. "Kaito's been distant all week," she said without preamble. "He barely looks at me, avoids being alone with me, and when my father mentions the merger..." She trailed off, twisting her ring again. "I'm starting to wonder if he wants this marriage at all." I focused on adjusting a flower arrangement, buying time to compose my response. Pre-wedding stress affects everyone differently. Some people withdraw when they're overwhelmed. "It's more than that." Raina leaned against the wall, suddenly looking exhausted beneath her perfect makeup. "Sometimes I catch him looking at me like he's trying to convince himself of something. And when he talks about our future, it sounds rehearsed." I knew that look. I'd seen it in the final weeks of our relationship. Kaito measuring his words, calculating his emotions, performing the role of devoted partner while mentally checking out. "Have you talked to him about how you feel?" I asked. "I've tried. He says everything's fine, blames work stress." She shook her head. "You've known him longer than I have. Was he always like this? So closed off?" The irony of her asking me, of all people, about Kaito's emotional patterns wasn't lost on me. "Kaito struggles with difficult conversations," I said carefully. "He wants everyone to be happy, sometimes at the expense of honesty." Raina studied my face. "You sound like you know him very well." "College friends see a lot of each other's true colors," I replied. The lie now so practiced it flowed easily. "But Raina, if you have doubts..." "Miss Takahashi," a server interrupted, bowing slightly. "Your father is requesting your presence at the head table. Dinner is about to be served." Raina straightened, her public persona instantly replacing the vulnerable woman from moments before. "We'll continue this conversation later," she said, squeezing my hand before following the server. I remained in the alcove for a moment, collecting myself. The conversation had veered dangerously close to territory I wasn't prepared to navigate. Not here, not surrounded by both families 2 weeks before a wedding that seemed increasingly built on deception. Dinner progressed with mechanical precision, each course arriving exactly on schedule, conversations flowing in polite, measured tones. I monitored from the periphery, making notes on timing and service for the actual reception. Across the room, May caught my eye and gave a subtle thumbs up, indicating that everything was running smoothly from her perspective. I was about to check in with the kitchen about dessert when Yumiko Takahashi, Raina's cousin, clinked her glass unexpectedly. The room quieted as she stood, slightly unsteady on her feet, her cheeks flushed from multiple rounds of sake. "I'd like to make a toast," she announced, her words just precise enough to suggest she was hovering at the edge of true drunkenness rather than fully in its grip. "To the happy couple." Beside her, her brother Hiroshi reached for her arm, attempting to guide her back to her seat, but she shook him off with a laugh. No, I'm being very appropriate," she insisted. "I just want to celebrate how efficient Kaito is with relationships." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Kaito sat rigidly at the head table while Reina looked confused. "Yumiko," Takahashi-san said warningly, but his niece continued. "I mean, most people take time between relationships, don't they? But not Kaito. So efficient." She smiled brightly, raising her glass higher. "When I met Nanami at your apartment 2 years ago, Kaito, she seemed so permanent. And yet here we are." The room went silent. All eyes turned to me, standing frozen by the service door. "What is she talking about?" Reina asked, turning to Kaito. Her voice carried clearly in the silence. "You said you and Nanami were just acquaintances from college." I watched Kaito's face as he calculated his response, weighing truths and lies like inventory. After a painfully long moment, he sighed. "Nanami and I were closer than I indicated," he admitted, not meeting Reina's eyes. "Closer?" Yumiko echoed with a laugh. "That's one way to put it. They dated for what, 3 years?" 3 years? Reina repeated, her voice rising slightly. She turned to me, betrayal written across her features. "You told me you were college friends." I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The careful facade I'd constructed was crumbling around me. "It was a long time ago," Kaito interjected. "It wasn't serious." The words hit me like a physical blow. 3 years reduced to wasn't serious in front of both families and friends. "Not serious?" I finally found my voice. "We lived together for a year, Kaito." Gasps rippled through the room. Reina stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You lied to me," she said to Kaito, then turned to me. "Both of you lied to me. For months." "Reina, I can explain," Kaito started. "Save it." She grabbed her clutch from the table. "I need some air." She walked out, spine straight, head high, the perfect picture of dignity, even in crisis. Kaito moved to follow, but Takahashi-san caught his arm, whispering something that made Kaito's face drain of color. After a tense moment, Kaito remained seated while Takahashi-san followed his daughter from the room. The remaining guests broke into uncomfortable murmurs. May appeared at my side, gripping my elbow supportively. "Well," she whispered, "that cat's definitely out of the bag. What now?" Before I could answer, Hiroshi approached us, guiding his still smirking sister toward the exit. "I apologize for Yumiko," he said quietly. "She has complicated feelings about family obligations, but that doesn't excuse her behavior." Yumiko rolled her eyes. "Please, someone needed to say something before this farce went any further." "That's enough," Hiroshi said firmly. To me, he added, "My uncle left his briefcase by the head table. Could you make sure it gets to his driver? I need to get Yumiko home." I nodded numbly, watching as he escorted his sister from the room. The dinner was effectively over. Guests began making discreet exits. The Nakamura family huddled in tense conversation, and serving staff cleared plates from abandoned place settings. In the chaos, I retrieved Takahashi-san's sleek leather briefcase from beside his chair. I'm not sure what made me do it. Curiosity? Suspicion? The culmination of weeks of half-truths and revelations? Whatever the reason, when I noticed the briefcase wasn't properly latched, I slipped into an empty service corridor and opened it. Inside were neatly organized folders labeled with corporate terminology. One labeled Nakamura Acquisition caught my eye. I glanced around to ensure I was alone before flipping it open. What I found wasn't a merger agreement but a systematic plan to dismantle Kaito's family business. Financial projections showed the company forced into bankruptcy within months of the wedding date if certain conditions weren't met. Margin notes in Takahashi-san's handwriting outlined strategies to acquire key assets at distressed valuations. This wasn't a business merger. It was a corporate execution disguised as a lifeline, with the wedding as the trigger. Footsteps approaching forced me to quickly close the briefcase and compose myself. A server appeared, looking harried. "There you are," he said. "Takahashi-san's driver is asking for his belongings." I handed over the briefcase, my mind racing with what I'd discovered. Whatever game Takahashi-san was playing, it was far more calculated than I'd imagined, and Kaito and Reina were simply pieces on his board. Sleep eluded me that night. I replayed the dinner disaster in endless loops, punctuated by fragments of the documents I'd glimpsed. By dawn, I'd given up on rest and was nursing my third cup of coffee at my kitchen counter, still in the oversized t-shirt and shorts I slept in. When a sharp knock came at my door at 7:30, I assumed it was May, coming to help me process the previous night's chaos. Instead, I found Kaito in the hallway looking like he hadn't slept either. "Can I come in?" he asked. I should have said no. Instead, I stepped aside wordlessly, allowing him into the apartment he'd never visited before. He stood awkwardly in my small living room, taking in the wedding magazines and sample books that still cluttered every surface, despite the fact that the wedding I'd been planning was likely no longer happening. "Coffee?" I offered, if only to break the silence. He shook his head. "Raina and I argued all night," he said without preamble. "She's staying at her parents' house now." "I'm sorry," I said automatically, though I wasn't sure if I was sorry for their argument or sorry for my role in causing it. "Are you?" He met my eyes directly for the first time. "You've been lying to her for months, just like I have." "That's different." "I lied about knowing you, you lied about—" I gestured vaguely. "Everything." Kaito sank onto my couch, suddenly looking exhausted. "Not everything, but enough." I remained standing, keeping the kitchen counter between us. "Why are you here, Kaito?" "I don't know." He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture that once made my heart skip, but now just made me tired. "To explain, maybe. To make sense of this mess." "I'm not sure there's much to explain. You proposed to Reina to save your family's company." He looked up sharply. "How did you—" "I overheard your argument with Takahashi-san, and I hesitated. I saw some documents in his briefcase. He's not planning a merger. He's planning to destroy your company if the wedding doesn't happen." Kaito nodded slowly. "I've suspected as much for weeks, but couldn't prove it. His lawyers keep changing the terms, making it impossible to finalize anything until after the wedding." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm trapped, Nami. 300 people work for my family's company. If it fails, they lose everything." "Don't call me Nami," I said automatically. "Sorry," he said, but without real contrition. "The point is, I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice," I countered. "You could have been honest with Reina from the beginning. You could have been honest with me when you ended things." "And said what?" "Sorry, Nami. I have to break up with you because my family's company is failing, and I need to marry someone with powerful connections? Would that have made it easier?" "Yes," I said firmly, "because at least it would have been the truth. Instead, you fed me that line about not being ready for anything serious and then proposed to someone else 3 months later." He was quiet for a long moment. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did." I wrapped my arms around myself. "And now you're hurting Reina too." "I know." He stood, moving toward me. "That's what keeps me up at night. I'm caught between what I have to do and what I want to do." "And what do you want to do?" I asked, though I knew I shouldn't. He stepped closer, entering my space. "I want to go back, before all this started, when it was just you and me." My breath caught as he reached for me, his hand grazing my cheek. For a dangerous moment, I allowed myself to remember. His touch, his smile, the way we fit together. Then reality reasserted itself. "Don't," I said, stepping back. "You don't get to do this." "Nanami." "No." I moved further away. "I'm not your escape route, Kaito. You made your choice months ago, and now you have to live with it." "It wasn't a choice," he insisted. "It was an obligation." "Then honor it," I said. "Or don't. But don't use me as your excuse to run away from your problems again." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "Is that what you think I did? Ran away? Didn't you?" I challenged. "When things got tough with us, you bailed. When your family needed you, you proposed to a woman you barely knew. And now that the consequences of those decisions are catching up to you, you're here, trying to, what? Rekindle something with me? Use me to justify breaking things off with Reina?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. "You should go," I said quietly. "Figure out what you really want, Kaito. Not what's easiest, not what your family needs, what you want." After a long moment, he nodded and moved toward the door. With his hand on the knob, he paused. "I did love you, you know. That wasn't a lie." I swallowed hard. "I know, but that doesn't change anything now." After he left, I stood in my kitchen, hands shaking slightly as I poured another cup of coffee I didn't need. The familiar ache in my chest wasn't as sharp as it once had been, more like the phantom pain of an old injury than a fresh wound. I was gathering the emotional strength to call May when another knock came at my door. Assuming Kaito had returned to continue our conversation, I yanked it open with more force than necessary. I told you to... I stopped short. It wasn't Kaito. It was Reina. She looked like she hadn't slept either, though she'd made an effort to conceal it. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore casual clothes I'd never seen her in before. Jeans, and a simple sweater that made her look younger, more vulnerable. "May I come in?" she asked, her voice steady despite the redness around her eyes. I stepped aside, mind racing. Had she seen Kaito leave my building? Was that why she was here? Reina entered cautiously, taking in the wedding planning materials with a bitter smile. Ironic, isn't it? All this work for a wedding that might not happen. I closed the door behind her. "Reina, Before you say anything," she interrupted, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me, completely honest for once." She turned to face me fully. "What was your relationship with Kaito, really? And why did you agree to plan our wedding?" I stood at the crossroads of truth and self-preservation. I could lie again, minimize my history with Kaito, protect my business and reputation, or I could finally be honest, regardless of the consequences. I took a deep breath and chose truth. "Kaito and I were together for 3 years," I began. "We lived together for the last year. He ended things suddenly, saying he wasn't ready for a serious commitment." I met her eyes. 6 months later, I saw your engagement announcement on Instagram." Reina flinched slightly but nodded for me to continue. "When I saw you both at your engagement party, I was angry, hurt, confused. I lied about being just his friend from college because I couldn't bear to admit the truth, that he had moved on so quickly while I was still struggling." "And becoming our wedding planner?" she asked. "Was that some kind of revenge plan?" "At first," I hesitated. "At first, maybe it was. I don't think I even knew what I wanted to accomplish. But then I got to know you, and the plan changed. You deserved better than my petty revenge scheme. You deserved the beautiful wedding you'd imagined. Even if the groom was your ex-boyfriend?" Her voice was surprisingly gentle. "Even then," I admitted, "because somewhere along the way, this became about more than just Kaito. It became about doing right by you." Reina moved to my window, looking out at the city below. "Did you know about the business arrangement between our families?" I hesitated. "Not at first. I pieced it together over time." "And last night? What did you see in my father's briefcase?" I stared at her in surprise. "How did you—" "Hiroshi told me he asked you to get it," she said. "And I know my father. He never leaves important documents unattended unless he means for someone to see them." The realization washed over me. It was a setup, but why would he want me to see those documents? Reina turned back to me. "My father plays the long game, always. He probably has several potential outcomes mapped out." She sighed. "But that's not important right now. What did you see?" I told her everything. The plans for bankruptcy, the asset acquisition strategy, the timing tied to the wedding date. As I spoke, her expression hardened from hurt to anger. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Did Kaito come here this morning?" I could have lied, should have lied, but I'd committed to honesty. "Yes," I admitted. "He left just before you arrived." "Did he tell you he still has feelings for you?" I looked away. "He tried to kiss me. I stopped him." Reina nodded, as if confirming something she already suspected. "Do you still love him?" "No," I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. "I loved who I thought he was, but that person doesn't exist." "I understand that feeling," she said quietly. "More than you know." She straightened her shoulders. "Thank you for being honest with me. Finally." "What will you do now?" I asked. "I don't know yet." She moved toward the door. "But whatever I decide, it will be my choice. Not my father's, not Kaito's. Mine." As she reached for the doorknob, I called after her. "Reina, I'm sorry for everything." She paused, looking back at me with a sad smile. "So am I. But strangely, I'm also grateful. At least now I know what I'm choosing, or walking away from." After she left, I sank onto my couch, emotionally drained but somehow lighter. The web of lies I'd been tangled in for months had finally unraveled, leaving me exposed, but free. Whatever happened next, whether the wedding proceeded or collapsed, Whether my business survived or failed, at least it would happen in the light of truth, rather than the shadow of deception. And for the first time in months, that seemed like enough. I arrived at the Garden of Dreams just as dawn broke over Tokyo. The morning air carried the sweet scent of cherry blossoms, mixed with the earthy perfume of fresh mulch and grass. A maintenance worker nodded as I passed, probably wondering why the wedding planner looked so exhausted when the ceremony was still hours away. The truth was, I hadn't really slept since Raina had left my apartment 3 days ago. I'd called and texted her repeatedly, but all my communications had bounced off the wall of silence she'd erected. Even her assistant would only confirm that all arrangements should proceed as scheduled, before politely ending the call. I unlocked the garden's reception pavilion and flipped on the lights. The space transformed instantly from shadowy emptiness to a fairy tale setting. Thousands of tiny lights were strung across the ceiling, creating the illusion of stars. White chairs with blush pink ribbons stood in perfect rows, facing an arch adorned with peonies and roses in varying shades of pink and white. Everything exactly as Raina had wanted. Everything perfect for a wedding that I wasn't sure would actually happen. I set my bag down and pulled out my clipboard with the day's timeline. Florists would arrive in 30 minutes for final touches. Catering staff would begin setup in the South Pavilion by 9. The string quartet was scheduled for a sound check at 10. All the moving pieces of a luxury wedding were falling into place with mechanical precision, indifferent to the human drama that threatened to unravel everything. "You're here early?" I turned to find Hiroshi standing in the doorway, looking remarkably calm for a man whose family was potentially on the brink of a public scandal. "That's my job," I replied, trying to sound more professional than I felt. Is she coming?" He approached, hands in the pockets of his tailored pants. "My cousin makes her own decisions. Always has, though few people realize it." He glanced around the venue. "It's beautiful work, Nanami. Whatever happens today, you should be proud of that." "Thanks," I said, the word catching slightly in my throat. "But I'd rather know if I'm setting up for an actual wedding or just creating the world's most expensive art installation." Hiroshi almost smiled. "The guests have been told to arrive as planned. Beyond that," he shrugged, "I suppose we'll all find out together." As he walked away, I fought the urge to throw my clipboard at his cryptic back. By noon, the venue had transformed into a buzzing hive of activity. Florists made final adjustments to centerpieces. The catering team arranged gleaming silverware on tables draped in ivory linens. The wedding cake, 6 tiers of vanilla buttercream with fresh berries, stood proudly on its display table, and still no sign of the bride or groom. "Everything's running on schedule," May said, appearing at my elbow with her tablet. I'd promoted her from moral support to official assistant for the day, partly because I needed the help, and partly because I needed someone who knew the whole messy truth. Though I'm not sure why we're bothering if no one's getting married. "Until someone tells me otherwise, we proceed as planned," I said, more firmly than I felt. "Did the quartet arrive?" "Setting up now, and the officiant just called to confirm he's on his way." She hesitated. "Any word from Raina?" "Nothing." I checked my phone for the 100th time that hour. "Her makeup and hair team arrived at the hotel suite an hour ago, but they haven't confirmed if she's actually there." "And Kaito?" "His best man texted that they're running on schedule, whatever that means." I rubbed my temple, feeling the beginning of a stress headache. Maybe they'll both just show up and pretend nothing happened. Rich people are weird like that sometimes. May raised an eyebrow. "After everything you told me? No way. Something's going to happen. I just hope it happens before we serve the $5,000 champagne." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text from the hotel concierge. "Miss Takahashi has arrived at the bridal suite and requests your presence immediately." I showed May the message. "Well, that's something," she said. "Go, I'll handle things here." The Imperial Garden Hotel adjoined the Garden of Dreams, connected by a private walkway reserved for wedding parties. The bridal suite occupied the entire top floor of the East Wing, offering panoramic views of Tokyo and complete privacy for the bride's preparations. I knocked on the ornate double doors, half expecting to be greeted by Raina's entourage of stylists and bridesmaids. Instead, Raina herself opened the door, already dressed in her wedding gown but with her hair only partially styled and her makeup minimal. "You came," she said, sounding relieved. "Of course I came," I replied, surprised by her tone. "You asked for me." She stepped aside to let me enter. The suite was eerily quiet. No bridesmaids chattering, no stylists fussing with veils or flowers. Just Raina, alone in a room designed for a dozen people. "Where is everyone?" I asked. "I sent them away." She moved to the window, the morning light catching the intricate beadwork on her bodice. I needed to think. I remained by the door, uncertain of my role in this moment. Was I still the wedding planner, a confessor, a friend, an enemy? "The venue is ready," I said, defaulting to professionalism. "Guests will begin arriving in about an hour." "Is it beautiful?" she asked, still gazing out the window. "It's exactly as you wanted, every detail." She turned to face me then, and I was struck by how calm she appeared. No red eyes, no tension in her shoulders. She looked like a woman who had made a decision. "Thank you for that," she said. "And thank you for telling me the truth. Finally." I shifted uncomfortably. "Raina, I'm so sorry for—" She held up a hand. "Let me finish. These past 3 days have been illuminating. I confronted my father about what you saw in those documents." A small, proud smile tugged at her lips. He was furious that I'd seen them, but he didn't deny anything. Just said he was protecting my interests. "And Kaito?" I asked. "Have you spoken to him?" "He's arriving soon." She smoothed her hands over the silk of her gown. "He doesn't know what I've decided yet." "Which is—" Raina met my eyes directly. "I realized something important after I left your apartment. I've spent my whole life fulfilling other people's expectations, my father's especially. The perfect daughter, the perfect student, the perfect corporate asset." She touched her engagement ring absently. "When Kaito proposed, I convinced myself I was in love because it was expected. The narrative was so perfect. Handsome business heir, family merger, society wedding. I fell in love with the story, not the man." She walked to the dressing table and picked up a small velvet box. "Do you know what's funny? I always thought my father controlled my life through force, but he didn't need to. I'd internalized his values so completely that I policed myself. Until now." The door opened behind me, and I turned to see Kaito standing in the threshold. He looked immaculate in his tuxedo, though his face betrayed surprise at finding me there. "Raina," he said cautiously, "your father is asking when we'll be ready to—" He stopped, noticing the atmosphere in the room. "What's going on?" Raina smiled at him with genuine warmth. "We need to talk, Kaito. Just the two of us." She glanced at me. "Nanami, would you give us a moment?" I nodded and moved toward the door, but Kaito caught my arm gently as I passed. Nanami, he corrected himself, his voice low. "Whatever happens, I want you to know." "Not now," I interrupted. "This isn't about me anymore." He released my arm and I slipped out the door, closing it behind me. I leaned against the corridor wall, exhaling slowly. Part of me wanted to press my ear to the door, to hear what they were saying to each other. Instead, I walked to the elevator and headed back to the garden, to do my job for as long as it remained my job to do. And the first guests were arriving when my phone buzzed with a text from Raina. "Please gather everyone in the reception pavilion, not the ceremony space. We're on our way." I found May directing the catering staff on champagne service. "Change of plans," I said, showing her the text. "They want everyone in the reception area, not the ceremony garden." May's eyes widened. "Holy shit, they're calling it off." "We don't know that," I said, though I suspected she was right. "Just help me redirect everyone, please." Together we informed the ushers of the change, and within 15 minutes, 200 beautifully dressed guests were gathered in the reception pavilion, murmuring in confusion. Takahashi-san stood near the entrance, his face a mask of controlled irritation as he checked his watch repeatedly. The room hushed as Raina and Kaito entered together, still in their wedding attire but without any attendants. They moved to the small stage where the band was set up, and Kaito took the microphone. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, his voice steady. "We've asked you to gather here because Raina and I have an announcement." The crowd shifted nervously. I spotted Kaito's parents near the front, his mother clutching her husband's arm with white knuckles. "The wedding ceremony will not be taking place today," Kaito continued, causing a wave of gasps and whispers. Raina stepped forward and took the microphone. "This is a joint decision made with clarity and mutual respect," she said, addressing the room but looking directly at her father. "While Kaito and I care deeply for each other, we've realized that marriage is not the right path for us." Takahashi-san moved toward the stage, his expression thunderous, but Hiroshi intercepted him, placing a restraining hand on his arm and whispering something in his ear that made him stop. However, Reina continued, the business partnership between our families will proceed, under new terms that I have personally negotiated with both boards of directors. She smiled slightly. Terms that ensure fair treatment of all employees and stakeholders, without requiring personal sacrifices. The shock in the room was palpable. I caught May's eye across the crowd, and she gave me a subtle thumbs up. We understand this is unexpected, Kaito said, taking the microphone again. But we hope you'll join us for the reception that has been so beautifully prepared. Consider it a celebration of new beginnings, rather than a wedding. And a recognition of braver choices, Reina added. The crowd remained stunned for a moment before breaking into small, confused conversations. Some guests immediately made for the exits, while others approached the couple with awkward congratulations or questions. Waiters began circulating with champagne, and the string quartet, after a moment of uncertainty, started playing. I remained at the back of the room, watching as the non-wedding reception gradually took on a rhythm of its own. Takahashi-san had disappeared, but most of the guests seemed to be staying, perhaps out of curiosity as much as politeness. After about 30 minutes, I slipped away to the ceremony garden, now sitting empty and perfect in the afternoon light. All that work, all those details created for a moment that would never happen. I began gathering programs from the chairs, tucking them into a box for recycling. Need some help? I looked up to find Kaito standing in the aisle between the rows of empty chairs. Shouldn't you be at your non-reception? I asked. Probably. He picked up a program and turned it over in his hands. Reina's handling it better than I am. She's always been better at navigating social complexity. I continued collecting programs, not responding. I owe you an apology, he said after a moment. Several, actually. You really don't, I replied, moving to the next row. None of this was about me. I was just caught in the crossfire. He shook his head. That's not true. This started with us, with how I ended things. I straightened, facing him directly. Kaito, I don't need your apology. I don't need closure or explanations or whatever this is. What happened between us is over. But I never what? Never processed it, never properly ended it, never thought about how your actions affected me? I was surprised by the lack of anger in my voice. I just felt tired. That's on you. It's your work to do, not mine. He looked genuinely pained. I did love you, Nanami. That wasn't a lie. I know, I said softly. And I loved you too, but love isn't enough when there's no honesty, no courage behind it. And now? He asked. Do you still? I considered the question, searching my feelings honestly. No, I realized. I feel sad for what happened, and for how much time I spent trying to make sense of it. But mostly I just feel sorry for you. He flinched slightly. Sorry for me? You've been so busy trying to please everyone else that you've never figured out what you actually want, I said. And that's a lonely way to live. We stood in silence for a moment among the empty chairs and unused flowers. Then he nodded once, as if accepting a verdict. Reina said something similar, he admitted. She's taking over her father's international division, on her own terms. Good for her, I said, meaning it. What about you? He asked. What happens to Nanami Mizushima, wedding planner after today? I looked around at the beautiful space I'd created. I think I might be good at this. For real, I mean. Not just as an accidental career born from whatever this was. He smiled, a genuine smile that reminded me of the Kaito I'd first fallen for years ago. You are good at it. Everyone says so. With that, he turned and walked back toward the reception, leaving me alone among the remnants of the wedding that wasn't. 6 months later, I sat in my new office in Shibuya, reviewing a contract for a spring wedding at the Hakone Gardens. The space was small but elegant, with large windows overlooking the busy street below. The walls displayed framed photos of weddings I'd planned. Real ones this time, built on my growing reputation for creating ceremonies that reflected the couple's authentic relationship rather than external expectations. My phone buzzed with a text from Reina. Client loved your proposal. Expect a call today to finalize. Dinner next week? I smiled as I typed back. Perfect. Your usual place or mine? Reina and I had developed an unexpected friendship in the aftermath of the non-wedding. She'd taken control of her family's international division and was slowly reforming its corporate culture, while occasionally referring clients to my now legitimate wedding planning business. I'd never seen Kaito again after that day in the garden. According to Reina, he had moved to the company's New York office, perhaps seeking distance from the memories in Tokyo. I wished him well, genuinely, though I no longer felt any need to keep tabs on his life. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. A young woman in a crisp blazer stood in the doorway, resume in hand. "Mizushima-san, I'm here for the assistant interview." "Come in," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "Tell me what interested you about working with Authentic Moments Weddings?" As she began her answer, my phone rang with an unknown number. I held up a finger to pause the interview. "Authentic Moments Weddings. This is Nanami speaking." The voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "Mizushima-san, I'm calling on behalf of the Ito family. They're seeking a planner for their daughter's wedding next spring. Raina Takahashi recommended you highly." I smiled, catching the eye of my potential assistant as I reached for my planner. "I'd be happy to discuss how we can help create a meaningful celebration for them. Can you tell me about the couple?" As I jotted notes, I felt a sense of steady satisfaction settle over me. Not the giddy highs of romance or the desperate achievement of proving something to someone else, but the quiet pride of having built something real from the ashes of deception. My journey had begun with a lie, but it had led me to a truth I might never have discovered otherwise. That the most authentic moments in life aren't the ones that follow a perfect script, but the ones where we finally find the courage to write our own.